Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I am Mick Alphanim. So, one of the most insane things has been to really go down this rabbit hole of the new financial system versus the legacy financial system. And you just see how broken the legacy system is. I mean, they're sitting on this throne. People have them up on this throne, but today we're going to rip them off of that throne. It's a false throne. Their system is on fire, listen. I have an article right here in front of me that says 10% of U.S. adults say they have high confidence in the nation's banks. 10%. So 10%. Then I have another article. I'm sorry, I'm jumping around, people. Let me just breathe some fire today. So 10% of U.S. adults trust the banks, which means what? 90% of U.S. adults don't trust the banks. Then you have Europe, this is from the dailyhodl.com. Europe must reduce reliance on US dollar, says French President Emmanuel Macron. Wait a minute, isn't France one of their allies? So even France, one of their allies, doesn't trust the US dollar, the US financial system. I have an article somewhere around here that has the ECB. It says that the ECB was warned. Well, this is about the European banks, I would assume, but they're all sort of one system in the West, right? ECB told not to take banks' word for it when assessing the risk. So when I hear about some IMF system or Fed system, do you really believe the rest of the world is going to use that? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Here's the thing. Because the West has such deep ties with the BRICS nations, they still have to do business. Even if they hate each other, they still have to do business with each other. They still have to move capital back and forth for the survival of their people, literally. Literally. You can't get around the new financial system. XRP, XLM, Algorand, Hedera, however you want to mix it. Right in the middle. Because these two sides, they just continue to spit on each other. You hear how badly United States talks about China? You hear that, right? And I don't know what China says about the U.S. I'm sure it's not great, right? They behave as enemies, although they benefit from each other greatly. So once again, even if though they dislike each other, they still have to do business. How are they going to move that capital? BRICS nations are making a system that the United States is not going to use. And the BRICS nations make up a huge portion of the world population. This only growing. Heck, they even brought in U.S. allies like Egypt, United Arab Emirates. You don't see what's going on here? But okay, so the BRICS nations is coming up with a common currency, a new financial system that the West is not going to use. You even hear West politicians now coming out right and saying, hey, there's a secondary economy that they're making. You heard that? You saw that? It has been making viral rounds lately. That this politician is so bold to say such a thing. Oh, they're making a secondary economy. We won't be able to sanction them. So the West is not going to be using their system. And safe to say, the BRICS nation is not going to use the West's system, correct? So then how do they interact? Because they must interact. I'm going to show you articles down here to prove everything. They must interact. You need an agnostic bridge currency. You need a neutral system. Facts. That's it. A system nobody owns. Sound familiar? I don't know. Stellar, XRP, Algorand, decentralization. You need that in the middle. It literally is a necessity for the future. Let me show you, though. Let me show you. Okay, so I'm just going to skip these two articles here. No, let's not skip it. PBS.org. This article, I just want to read these little tidbits. It says only 10% of U.S. adults say they have high confidence in the nation's banks. So even U.S. people don't have confidence in their banks. But you think the rest of the world is supposed to let them glue all the CBDCs together with some IMF system? With some Fed system? Listen, they're done. The legacy system is finished. It's a slow fall, but the fall has begun. Let's go here. Once again, like I said, Europe. This article is from the dailyhodl.com. Europe must reduce reliance on US dollars, says French President Emmanuel Macron. I thought France, wait a minute. Europe, France, they part of the West, aren't they out? You starting to see the writing on the wall? All right, let's go here. To show you that they're still going to have to do business with each other, even though they continue to spit on each other and test and tempt war with each other. And I'll show you some articles on that. Even if they hate each other, they still have to do business with each other. I'm just going to show you these connections here. This is from Google. Chinese companies invested 38.25 billion US dollars into firms in the United States in 2021. That means they're still going to have to do business. How do you move that capital back and forth? The West is not going to use BRIC systems, and BRIC's not going to use the West systems. You need the new financial system right in the middle, glues everything together. All the while, we're worried about the legacy system being glued to the new financial system and interoperability there. Really, what's going to be glued together really is the BRIC system and the legacy system in the United States. That's really what's going to get glued together and have a ton of capital flowing through us. $38.25 billion US dollars into firms in the United States in 2021. That's not going anywhere. That's not going anywhere. So they still have to do business with each other. Let's go here. This is an article from the SSRN. So it's reputable. These are pro researchers. All right. It's titled Monetary Tightening and U.S. Bank Fragility. That's another problem. No one can trust the U.S. financial system. Their leaders are incompetent. They don't have monetary intelligence. They just don't. They've made all the bad moves, all the worst moves. You believe that the rest of the world is going to trust their money and CBDCs to be moving through an IMF or Fed now based system? I have to respectfully disagree with you. So let's read this a little bit here. Mark-to-market losses and uninsured depositor runs. We analyzed U.S. banks' asset exposure to a recent rise in the interest rates with implications for financial stability. The U.S. banking system's market value of assets is $2.2 trillion lower than suggested by their book value assets, accounting for loan portfolios held to maturity. You can't trust them at all. Marked to market, bank assets have declined by an average of 10% across all banks. Yeah, they're terrible. With the bottom 5th percentile experiencing a decline of 20%. That's good business to you. That's good business. Who's trusting them? Who's trusting the Fed who destroyed their own system? Let's keep going. This is, we illustrate in a simple model that uninsured leverage is the key to understanding whether these losses would lead to some U.S. banks becoming insolvent, unlike insured depositors. Uninsured depositors stand to lose a part of their deposits if the banks fail, potentially giving them incentives to run bank runs. We show that a bank's survival depends on the market beliefs, which is at an all-time low. Market beliefs about the share of uninsured depositors who will withdraw money following a decline in the market value of bank assets. That's another thing. The whole system is on fire right now. And they're trying to convince people that that the world is going to use their system to glue all the CBDCs together and move all the cross-border capital and things like that. Whatever it is that they're saying is a lie. It's a lie. It's just my humble opinion. I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I only represent myself. This is not financial advice. But I just know that given the state of the world, no one trusts the US-based system, the West-based systems, who only serve themselves, who will be weaponized against them, and they don't even know what's going on in their own systems. But let's continue on here. 10% of banks have a larger unrecognized losses than those at SVB. If that's not a bombshell, I don't know what is. Nor was SVB the worst capitalized bank. It's not even the worst. Let's keep it going. With 10% of banks having lower capitalization than SVB. On the other hand, SVB had a disproportional share of uninsured funding. Only 1% of banks had higher uninsured leverage. Combined, losses and uninsured leverage provide incentives for an SVB uninsured depositor run. We compute similar incentives for sample of all U.S. banks. Now let's get into a little bit of specificity on some things we've said before. They're going to give it to you. It says, even if, pay attention to this, keep abreast and privy of the catalyst, because something is coming. Might be, it's a high probability something is coming. Let me read this a little bit here. Even if only half of uninsured depositors decide to withdraw. Almost 190 banks, that's that almost 200 I was talking about the last few videos. Almost 190 banks with assets of $300 billion are at potential risk of impairment, meaning that the mark-to-market value of their remaining assets after these withdrawals will be insufficient to repay all insured deposits. Wait a minute. Hold up. Wait a minute. They don't have enough money in it. Wait a minute. What was FDIC's complete fund? What was that, like 128 billion, something like that? What's the total of uninsured deposits in the bank? This is from the FDIC.gov itself. Deposit insurance fund balance increased by 2.8 billion. Oh, that's cute. To $128 billion. Are you kidding me? Wait a minute. Total bank deposits reported $17 trillion. They don't have enough money. The banking system is broken. I mean, listen, if you're seeing something different, I can respect that. Let me know down below in the comment section. You can correct me. And I'm definitely open to hearing your opinion, but I'm showing you the actual data. I'm showing you the articles. These are facts. This is coming from government websites. They don't have enough money. If anything happens at all, listen. They want to have a battle with another superpower. I'm going to be careful how I say this. They want to have a battle with another superpower, or at least they're positioning themselves like that's what they want. But knowing that anything could trigger a bank run, that type of activity, if anything were to happen, occur, pop off, it could cause bank runs. And it only takes half of those depositors to pull for a massive bank run to happen on over 200 banks, which would then have their own ripple effects on other financial systems. But this is the system that you believe that the world is going to trust to move all. If they do, that they're very foolish. But it doesn't look that way right now. It doesn't. They can't even help their own systems. They can't even help their own people, which they should. They should. But there's no way that these false kings and queens are the chosen ones to run the world. They are falling. It's Rome 2.0. But let's continue on here. I need to put more facts out there. They're still, even with the battles that they're trying to do, all this contention in the world, they just drove their battleship over there to Taiwan. Did you read that article? Even with all of that, they still have to rely on each other for survival, or their people are in for a hard time. The West relies on the East and the East relies on the West. I'm just going to show you a little bit of how they're all deeply interconnected. This is from madeinamerica.com. It's titled, American Companies You Didn't Know Were Owned by Chinese Investors. AMC, General Motors, Spotify, Snapchat, Hilton Hotels. It just keeps going. They still are going to have to transact back and forth, but they're not going to use each other's systems. So you need the new financial system in the middle. You can't tell me that the superpowers of the world, these large groups like NATO and BRICS nations, if they're trying to battle each other, that they're going to use each other's financial systems. You hear them saying, hey, BRICS nations, we're coming up with our own financial system, our own common currency. Then you have the East doing what the West, sorry about that, doing what they do. So neither one of them is going to move everything. Interesting. So who's going to move everything? Who's going to glue everything together? Tell the truth. Tell the truth. The new financial system. It's the only logical thing. Don't get me wrong. They could be very illogical. Most of these so-called leaders and, powers are completely illogical. but they are intertwined. So someone has to move that capital. Something has to move that capital. I'm going to show you a little bit more of the connections of why something it has to be in the middle to move that capital. This is from Google.com. Chinese companies invested $38.25 billion in the U.S. 38.25 billion US dollars into firms in the United States. And that was only in 2021. That's not going to change. Though that capital still going to have to move back and forth, back and forth. Not to mention that the West gets a great amount of its goods from China, Europe from China, and Brazil. Let me keep saying it. Repetition is the mother of learning. I want people to search this up for themselves so they know for themselves and have the power of knowledge, real knowledge, not just hearsay, not because people said this or that and it sounded good. It don't have to sound good as long as it's the truth. So 38.25 billion in only 2021 alone. You're going to need a new financial system in the middle after all this spitting is done. They're just spitting on each other left and right. United States spitting on China, even though they need China. China spitting on United States, even though they need United States. You need the new financial system in the middle. Let's keep going. Let's keep exposing the facts here. So then you had this activity. This is from AP News. See what I'm talking about here? U.S. sails warship through Taiwan Strait after China drills. Remember the other day I told you China accelerated their activity? First they started where they just had their ships out a little bit between China and Taiwan. Then they accelerated because a lot of people, I have to say that because a lot of people were saying they're not going to do anything. Well, they did something. They surrounded Taiwan. That's a huge step. It's such a huge step that today is being reported the U.S. sailed warships through Taiwan Strait. Let's read this little tidbit here. Once again, and even with all of this, if they don't want things to be extremely hard on each other's peoples, they still have to do business with each other. Who's going to move that capital? The new financial system. That's the point here I'm trying to make. Tell me if you see something different. So the United States Navy has sailed a warship through Taiwan Strait in its first known transit since China carried out an encirclement exercise around self-ruled Taiwan. The U.S. 7th Fleet said the transit through the strait by the USS Milius on Sunday was routine. Right. The cruisers, quote, transited through a corridor in the strait that is beyond the territorial sea of any coastal state, quote unquote, the statement said. Last week, China concluded a large-scale air and sea drills in the strait in retaliation for Taiwan's president. I'm not going to get into all that political stuff. My interest here is just the new financial system and how all this affects it. But so they're in contention with this type of contention, this type of beef cooking. They're not going to use each other's systems, but they're both world superpowers. Once again, you need that new financial system in the middle. Smack dab in the middle, put the paper on the wood. It makes the betting good. Let's go here. I'm telling you, and the world is rapidly changing. People don't want to accept it. To be able to survive is to adapt to change. All strong systems, they put that pressure on you to make you change, to make you adapt, to become stronger. This is the same thing here. The strong are going to survive. The strong might capitalize on generational wealth generated from activities where a new financial system has to be employed. So the world can continue to exist the way that it does. If these two entities get into it, and hopefully they don't, they would have to come to the table, mutually assured destruction. Come on now, and say, hey, listen, we're going to do our thing over here. You do your thing over there. We both kind of need each other. You need us we produce most of your products. You know, we have heavy investments in you, so we benefit from you that way. You got a lot of power monetarily, militarily. We don't want any problems with you. And then you have to negotiate that neutrality in the middle. Ripple, deep in Southeast Asia. Ripple, respected in China. V-Chain, respected in China. Stellar, deep in Southeast Asia. Stellar, deep in Europe. Ripple, deep in Europe. I mean, you see where it's going? India. They glue already. The new financial system already glues everything together already. The switch just hasn't been flipped. You see? I can't give people the vision. Let me just. Then you had this. There was something that happened that was very telling that could say that the world could be shaken up and yes, their financial systems will not be interacting without us in the middle. Because there was some information that came out that wasn't supposed to come out. I'll be careful how I say this. This is from theguardian.com. I'm going to let them tell you. It says China likely to rapidly achieve air superiority over Taiwan, U.S. leaks say. So the U.S. leaks said that. This is what the Guardian's saying, not Alpha Neem. This is what the Guardian is saying. I've heard it other places as well. It did happen. It occurred. But so if that were to happen, and now they know that the U.S. thinks that they can do that, why wouldn't they do that if they know now that they believe that they could take air superiority and the West believes that they could take air superiority? Wouldn't that embolden that individual to actually take that step forward? But if that were to happen, that leads to more contention, if not more bad things. We'll just put it that way. But what I'm saying is with the financial systems and how powerful BRICS nations are becoming and are right now, they're not, once again, still, they would have to do business with each other in some way. That money would have to move back and forth. Who's going to glue it all together? Not an IMF system, not a Fed system. They will not be trusted. They're not even respected, really. They've just been bullying people for a long time, so they just go along with it. As you saw, Saudi Arabia say, hey, we're done pleasing the U.S. I showed you that article yesterday. This is what it says. China would probably establish air superiority very rapidly in any attack on Taiwan, according to leaked U.S. intelligence assessments that raised disturbing questions about the self-ruled island's military readiness. And remember, they would if that were to happen, and you know what certain politicians in the United States said, hey, we would destroy the semiconductors. These two would be pissed off at each other, but still, in order to live, they would have to interact. U.S. doesn't produce many things. Most of the stuff people get from stores and Amazon and all that stuff made in China on the back. I mean, maybe you see it differently. I can respect that. So be it. I'm not here to convince you of anything. I just speak for myself. Once again, let's move here. OK. So then you have this. Once again, let's get back to the burning, flaming heap that is the U.S. banking system. Be upset with the politicians. Be upset with the head of the Fed. Be upset with all the U.S. Treasury. They're the ones who allowed this to get this way. I'm just reading the news. This is from their CNN.com. I don't have anything to do with these individuals except reading these articles from time to time. It says here, the toll of the WFH era. Consensus is forming around 3 key areas that analysts fear could create systemic problems. And people tell me all the time the banking system is not on fire when I'm saying, hey, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm researching. And it looks the banking system is not doing well. Not just the banking system. My apologies. The entirety of the U.S. financial system is in trouble. I'm just speaking from the research that I'm reading. Some people will never believe they don't believe the Titanic is sinking until the water hits their ankles. It says a consensus is forming around 3 key areas that analysts fear could create a systemic problem. We spoke about commercial real estate. That's first on their list. Commercial real estate, underwater bond portfolios, and the industry with the most metal moniker ever, shadow banks. We heard about that before, didn't we? But people still believe the world will trust a system like this. Let's read a little bit. Commercial real estate. They haven't managed anything well. They haven't done anything well. They fumbled everything. And yet commercial real estate, offices, apartment complexes, warehouses, and malls has come under substantial pressure. Says my colleague Julia Horowitz reports commercial property valuations could fall roughly 20 to 25% this year. This is the system that's going against us. Where's their victories? What have they done great? According to Rich Hill, head of real estate strategy at Cohen and Steers, for offices, declines could be even steeper, topping 30%. Office properties are a particular pain point here. The average occupancy of offices in the United States is still less than half their March 2020 levels, according to data from security provider Castle, so it's reputable, all right? About $270 billion in commercial real estate loans held by banks, will come due in 2023. Nearly a third of that, $80 billion, is on office properties. This is the system that who around the world is going to trust them? Now you see why even their allies are sliding back like, hey, I don't know about U.S. financial system. Let's just quietly slide out of here. Exactly. They are worried. The rest of the world is worried about the U.S. dollar. Even U.S. allies. You hear about France. You see what France is doing. You see what Egypt is doing. So what United Arab Emirates is doing. They're concerned, and rightly so. They're not afraid to call it what it is. There's a problem. But let's continue on here. I know some people are not going, unrealized losses is the next paragraph. Back when interest rates were near zero, U.S. banks gobbled up long-dated treasuries and mortgage-backed securities. It says, and typically that's a safe move if you make sure to hedge against the risk of those assets losing value, which SVB did not. But as the Fed and other central banks have raised interest rates aggressively, the value of those bonds has eroded. We've talked about this before. That's a problem. This is your Fed. This is the Fed you think people believe in? They're supposed to believe in? U.S. banks are now sitting on an estimated $620 billion in unrealized losses. Their Fed kicked them in the stomach. Their assets are worth less now than they pay for them, making it a problem if the bank is forced to sell those assets in a crisis, like, say, a bank run. Interesting. That $620 billion is a conservative estimate, experts say, and it remains unclear where those unrealized losses loom, whether they are spread out across the sector or concentrated among certain kinds of lenders. Shadow banks, the next one. It says, as we discussed here, shadow banking refers to financial institutions that lend out money like a bank, but don't take deposits from customers. They are large and diverse cast that includes investment banks, but they're worried about crypto. They're worried about crypto, but you have this going on that they're clearly concerned about. We even heard the Bank of International Settlements say the same thing. But here they're over here bullying, jumping, kicking and stomping crypto. Come on now. And crypto community, like I said, crypto communities should stick together. They should, but they don't. But they should. And go against the legacy system. If you want to go against somebody, go against the legacy system. But hey, who am I to say? It says, there are a large and diverse cast that includes investment banks, hedge funds, insurance companies, private equity funds, all manner of Wall Street power players. The menacing nickname can be interpreted widely. They're in the shadows because they're unregulated. What? Wait a minute. I could have sworn the West was all about regulation. Wait, I could have sworn that crypto had to be regulated. It's got to be regulated. Not being regulated is a problem. It's a problem, isn't it? It's what the SEC said. It's what a lot of the politicians said. How many politicians took money and sat down, had sit downs with Sam Bankman-Fried again? You think he was the only one? Maybe you're right. Maybe he was the only one they took money from. Allegedly. This is what article said, not what I'm saying. Allegedly. Interesting. Let's read that again, because that's shocking. The menacing nickname can be interpreted widely. They're in the shadows because they're unregulated. Sure. But are they like shady? Yes and no. Hedge funds and private equity types get a bad rap that is sometimes deserved, but they also provide financing. They say some positive things. We all know that. It says, but banks and non-banks overlap in all kinds of real perceived ways. And when confidence is eroded on either side, that creates a potential for panic to spread. Okay, let's move on to another article here. I have like 8 more articles delving into this. Once again, the summation of this is that the new financial system is still in the game. They are fudding people out. The world does not have faith in an IMF or a Fed-based system. That there needs to be an intermediary of sorts, a glue in the middle to bring the West and the East together when all this dust settles. There's going to be lots of trouble and problems. You can see it right now, all these warships and things going on, all this tough guy talk, spitting on each other back and forth. You need something in the middle, and that is the new financial system. They're dragging this out. They're dragging this in the dirt right now, so people want to leave. That way, when they flip the switch and they say, hey, we're ready to implement this, not just ready to implement, but hey, we have to, because now we can't interact directly with the BRICS nations. They have their own system, and the BRICS nation is going to say, hey, wait a minute, we can't interact with the East, but they still need to, out of necessity. They don't want to, they need to. How do they do that? You need something in the middle. That's the point I'm trying to raise here. This is where it's all heading. Listen, maybe I'm wrong. I believe that I'm correct. I'm just going by what I'm seeing here. You tell me if there's a different way. Whose CBDCs are they going to glue together? Are they going to bring together? Who's trusting them with their capital? So this article here is from the LA Times, and is titled, "The Fed's Errors Have Brought the Economy to the Brink of Recession." I've seen a myriad of articles written like this. This is who the people believe is going to dominate us. This is who the world is supposed to trust. And this is from a declining superpower. It says the central bank has been running from its critics ever since. This is the Los Angeles Times saying this. The Fed, the central bank has been running from its critics ever since. Under its chairman, Jerome H. Powell, it has instituted the most aggressive anti-inflation interest rate increases in more than 40 years, as if to make up for its initially laggard response to what proved to be nearly a year-long run-up in prices. In the process, however, the Fed has inflicted damage on bank balance sheets that could have a more lasting negative effect on economic growth than would be felt from even a sustained period of high inflation. So they fumbled all types of money and monetary policy, but all of these banks around the world are supposed to run their CBDCs through these people, their systems. I just don't see it happen. I have to beg to differ. I just don't see it going that way. Let's go here to another article. This is from Politico.com to show you even Europe is like, wait a minute, slow down, US, hold on. You're going to need something to glue all these systems together, new financial system. This article is titled, "The US Wants Europe to Stand Up to China." Listen, it's going to be devastating for the US to be going directly against China if that happens. Devastating. It will be just as devastating for Europe. Remember, Europe relies heavily on China, Brazil. Heck, they were relying heavily on Russia. Remember how they were impacted by Russia when all that stuff happened? Once again, because they have to interact for survival, who's going to move all that capital? New financial system, neutral system, leveling the playing field, agnostic bridge currency, settlement tokens, smart contracts, all that good stuff to make sure there's trust. That system that nobody is in control of in the middle. It's my humble opinion. It says the US is trying to charm and cajole Europe into linking arms to confront China. But Europe has other priorities in mind. Once again, all these nations wanting to join BRICS, Mexico, I believe Uruguay, United Arab Emirates is a part of it, Egypt, India, South Africa, other African countries are interested now as well. I mean, it just goes on and on. Russia, obviously China. I mean, huge part of the world. And that's not including the ones who are getting close to the BRICS nations. Then you have to ask yourself, what does the United States bring to the table? What does the West bring to the table to persuade these countries otherwise? Anyway, let's get back to this article here. It says ahead of Redacted's meeting with the European Union Chief Ursula von der Leyen in Washington on Friday, U.S. officials have been offering Europe both urgent warnings about Beijing and pledges to smooth over trade disputes. Europe's response has been ambivalent at best, with many countries hesitant to pull away from the profitable China. My apologies. A pop-up keeps popping up here. Hesitant to pull away from the profitable Chinese market. You see, there's a problem brewing even in the West, amongst the West alliance. Said not least Germany, which has strong trade links. Says the Europeans, quote, this is a quote, the Europeans have already experienced deep economic trauma because of cutting off Russia. They cannot imagine cutting off China. You see, they're still going to have to do business with each other, even though they might pretend they don't like each other. This was said by Heather Connolly, a former State Department official overseeing European and Eurasian affairs in the George W. Redacted administration. Okay. So let's continue on here. Once again, and I just want to throw this in there, that it doesn't seem like anybody in their financial system knows what's going on. You had Janet Yellen the other day say, hey, we might not need to raise interest rates anymore because banks are tightening on their lending. Then you have JP Morgan here saying, says JP Morgan CEO, Diamond, I don't know how to pronounce his name, my apologies, says be prepared for interest rates to remain higher for longer. They continue to say this. Which one is it? They're going to stop interest raises and rising interest rates? Or they're going to do it higher for longer? Who knows? So there's all this confusion. Do you think the rest of the world is going to trust this system? New financial system coming in hot. They're shaking people out. They're going to continue to shake the people out. And they bluff very good. I'm not going to, they definitely have a good bluff, but that doesn't work on everybody. Everything in the West is on fire, but people still believe that the West is going to lead everyone else. We're going to end off with this here. I still have 6 other articles that I didn't even get to. I just want to show you the West is on fire, and yet people believe that the West has some system that's going to supplant us, a global system that's neutral, that everybody can use and benefits everybody. I lay all of that evidence out to say, new financial system looking good, new financial system looking strong, and right now I believe it's needed more than ever. It's going to be needed more than ever. We have to stay on top of the catalyst to see when it's going to be implemented, if they're actually going to be implemented. Are they going to be super ignorant and just go down with the ship? We have to stay on top of the catalyst, see what's actually there, and then we can adjust accordingly. But right now, the new financial system looks stronger than ever and looks more necessary than ever as the world tears itself apart and is going to need something in the middle to move all that capital back and forth in a fair, neutral way. So now that you have that information, what are you going to do with it? I know what I'm going to do with it. So until next time, let's get to the money.